All right, let's get started. So, hi again, everyone. My name is Eric Sirizato. I'm the product group manager for the Genetech clearance product line at Genetech. So, many of you may have already heard of clearance, and some of you may not have. The application itself is one that we launched about 2 years ago now, and it is a digital evidence management system that we built to help address some of the challenges customers have brought to us when it came to having to manage and share video from their Genetech system or from their different VMSs that they may be using. And in that time, one of the terms that kept coming up very frequently in meetings with clients is sneakernet. And this one always made me smile. As far as jargon goes, I thought this one was really appropriate, and it's really descriptive in terms of what it means, even if it's the first time you hear it. So uh, when people were bringing it up, it's always in reference to having to actually burn information to DVD or having to put video onto USB keys, and then someone spending their time to actually carrying it over to the recipient. And when you think about all of the different methods that we have to communicate today, whether it's by email or by chat, it's very frustrating to think that when it comes to sharing video, it's all a very manual process that's really time consuming. Whenever this came up, most of the organizations who use the term were really frustrated and wanted to see it disappear, as they want to see it disappear and improved with something different. So this became really our mantra and a bit of our battle cry internally, at looking at different methods on helping to improve that traditional process and replace it with something a lot more efficient. So today's webinar, we're going to cover some of those challenges that are frequently brought up. I suspect that many of you on the call will already feel the pain and know them well already. And we'll also highlight a program that was launched in the city of San Diego, where they've been using technology to help facilitate the sharing of video evidence between different stakeholders in the city. And based on that use case and that or case study, we're also looking at different ways to enhance private-public collaboration. So making it easier for private businesses to actually share video in new ways with law enforcement and attorneys. So we'll highlight this via demo and also provide a overview on just general clearance functionality. So at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A. So if you have any questions over the course of the presentation, please just send them through the GoToMeeting chat. So just at the bottom right of the screen, you'll see a chat menu, and I'll cover everything at the end of the call. The presentation should last about 40 minutes or so, so the rest of the time we'll have available for questions. And in case there's anyone on the call today who's less familiar with Genetech, so just a quick highlight. The organization was founded back in 1997, so we've been operating for just over 20 years now. It's grown quite significantly, where we have just under 1,500 employees worldwide today. A lot of them in the engineering role. And we've helped to build an application that is really the leader in unified physical security, where we're also the leading manufacturer of VMS software, video management software within the surveillance space. And that's likely where many of you know us best. And frankly, it's where a lot of where we were first beginning to hear about many of the challenges that you're encountering when it comes to dealing with investigations and forensic video. So this is in those initial discussions where we're learning about how video was being managed, not 24/7 when it was being recorded by the application, by the VMS, but actually when an event occurred. So those times when an incident happens and then you need to share the video with another stakeholder who might be within your organization or external, like the police or an attorney. So this became really interesting because we want to not only address that scenario, but also help to improve the workflow. And this is where we really feel like we can reduce a lot of the time spent and the operational resources that are allocated in having to do things that are mostly mundane, like searching for video, burning it to a disk, and then having to query it or transport it over to the people who are making those requests. We see that video has really been responsible for disrupting traditional workflows, where we're not only looking at a video that's been produced by Security Center or the VMS you'd be using. It really goes beyond that. There's a lot of other information that's highly complementary to the incident, and it's likely being managed in other systems altogether, whether that's your incident management tool, your case management or LP management tool, or depending on the people on the call, maybe even your CAD or your record management system. So all of these hold the information about your suspects, the event logs, but then the video itself will live in other systems. And when I say video, it can be even larger than that, whether it's suspect databases or photographs. So here, only certain individuals will have access to each of the applications, which may create some blind spots where they may not be able to review all of the information that could be available. And then when there's a requirement to actually share that information with others internally, whether that's the risk team or the legal department, or sometimes with other jurisdictions like law enforcement and district attorneys or crown attorneys, well, that just becomes even more difficult, where there's going to be a process involved in putting onto a disk and sending it off to them. So we're really, to accommodate video today, or and specifically the forensic video, what we see is that most organizations are just putting it on DVDs inside a cabinet or evidence locker where they'll keep it stored, or it will be on a shared network drive somewhere where maybe there'll be a repository where you'll have your 2015, 2016, 2017 recordings where it'll be maintained. But this all creates different challenges when it comes to compliance and making sure you can protect that information so it doesn't get leaked and the actual incident video doesn't become available to unauthorized individuals. So in looking at the solution as a whole, while we want to make it easier to share information, we want to make sure that's only going to the appropriate people. So here it's also important that we consider the level of access certain individuals will have, who will be privy to be able to actually go and review certain files, and also to control how long the information is stored. A lot of the times, unfortunately, just because there isn't automation in place, people tend to store everything forever, just because it tends to be forgotten. So here we can look at different approaches to help expire and delete information that is more on a workflow or on a rule-based basis. So what it boils down to, from what we've seen, is that in the absence of having an application that handles these workflows, organizations are relying on paper forms to receive for their intake of different requests. This might be requests that you have, again, from your internal partners and collaborators. So whether that's the legal and the risk and compliance teams, or it may be forms that you're asking law enforcement and attorneys to fill. And in certain states or jurisdictions, you might require, you might have a need to share it with citizens for open records or data access requests. So typically this would come in via email. You'll ask them to fill a form, and then that information will be burned to a disk or to a USB key before it can be shared. So we're really looking to strike two important notes. One is efficiency and the other is compliance. We want to make the whole process more seamless and easy, where you'll be able to share the information with your partners electronically. So making sure that the information is encrypted, that the access rights are appropriate. And then The second point is making sure you have better governance of your data. So here you're able to ensure the privacy of the information that's being shared, and that the people who have access to it, they're the right people and the individuals that are trustworthy. So to really highlight this use case, I want to bring up a case study of the city of San Diego, who in late 2018 deployed a smart streetlight program. So just for additional context, the city of San Diego, their police department includes just under 2,000 sworn officers, and they respond to just above 500,000 calls for service in a city that covers over 1 million people. So like most organizations, it's a challenge of having too much to do and the lack of resources to be able to address it all. And this is a city that's never leveraged public surveillance cameras or any citywide surveillance program. The creation of the smart streetlight program was really interesting. So for one, it helped the city save a lot of cost in the lighting, where now everything can be controlled over Ethernet on what the lighting schedules are, making sure that they get health reports from the lighting infrastructure. But really more pertinent to our call is that each of these smart nodes also included different types of sensors that were attached to it. One of these sensors are surveillance cameras. So once the infrastructure has been deployed, the city and the police department then benefited from over 6,000 new cameras that were attached to these nodes. So one of the reasons that traditionally why San Diego never implemented a surveillance system within the city is because there was a lot of concerns over personal privacy. So they really want to avoid the sentiment that citizens were being observed by the government or the police department. So that was always a really important line to toe. So when this program came into place, it was very, very important where they had strict guidelines that the police department would only be using the cameras to focus on really the most violent crimes, or those resulting in the loss of life, or that had a direct impact to public safety. So here, with that in place, they're better able to work alongside privacy organizations like the ACLU to show the benefit that this program is having to community safety and the community in general. So far, the program has been a major success. They've considered it themselves as being a force multiplier, where now the police officers, detectives are able to review video, review events from these cameras before actually having to dispatch someone out to analyze the scene in more detail. So they've used it in over 150 different investigations now, where, as you can imagine, rather than to have to go on the scene of the crime, here investigators can just review video and from the precinct and get context of what happened at the scene. Now, what's interesting in the law enforcement scenario is that even though, even in different cities that do have a real-time crime center and surveillance program, there's going to be a restriction for the level of access members of the department will get. Very few individuals actually have access to the live and the recorded video feeds, so very few people have access to the client connections. And typically officers, detectives, well, they're making those requests internally and receive the video back as on a disk or on a USB key. So what was interesting here is that through the technology, that all of the requests were going through a workflow first, where the video is being approved before it's being released. Now they were able to extend access to a much larger group of individuals, so that way the request can be validated first. So this has not only helped, it has not only helped the investigators solve different crimes and incidents inside the city, It's also helped from a litigation standpoint where attorneys are able to leverage the video to secure convictions and guilty pleas, as opposed to going through the full trial process, which would cost way more in public funds. It's also had some really successful anecdotes in helping to exonerate different suspects by just providing that extra context that video can help provide to show what's happened before, during, and after an incident. So what we learned in this are really different ways on how we could improve streamlining what the video request process looks like. So like I was mentioning, one of those really important aspects to it is providing a policy-based workflow to be able to request and then release the video to different collaborators. So that means that we're providing a self-service portal where people can make requests for video recordings without necessarily giving them access to all of the live or the recorded video information. So here it's really going to be more on a request basis. To make this successful, what was also important is being able to automate a lot of the functionality. So when a request is made, being able to automate the export of the file. Help to avoid the need for an operator to go search for the video or to export it and to burn it on a disk afterwards, so it can be immediately delivered to the requester. And then ultimately, just have a standardized and central application to store all of these requests and historical records. So as opposed to it being paper-based where it's being manually handled by each department or organization, now it's just a single tool where you're able to view any new requests when past performance on historical ones. So looking at the San Diego project again, we're also use this as an opportunity to learn where we can enhance the formula and bring this to other organizations where who can leverage the same approach and benefit from the technology. So to improve on it, one of the things we were really interested in doing is to make sure that we can bring in more sources of information. So not only restrict it to the smart light nodes, but actually tie in Security Center and other sources of video. So that way we can build the same type of automation when requesting and exporting video. Likewise, providing more of a rules-based approach in being able to attribute who is a requester, who can approve the release of video, and who may not require approval. Those are the sets of policies that can be established within the application. So that way you can either grant or restrict the level of access different stakeholders will have depending on what it is you want to provide. And then finally, and really important for this call, what we absolutely wanted to do is provide this technology, but for non-law enforcement organizations. So make it really meaningful for when private organizations are releasing video to their internal stakeholders or for external requests. And really, in looking at it, what we saw was really important is helping to maximize operational resources. So on both ends, whether it's law enforcement or corporate security teams, really reducing the amount of legwork investigators or operators would need to do in sharing information. So from the law enforcement perspective, what becomes interesting is helping them to more easily identify where cameras of interest may exist, so they can make requests for video and then minimize the amount of time required to actually share those files with them and eliminate the need to export anything onto a disk or USB and review it on a standalone video player. What was also really critical is also maintaining chain of evidence from the initial delivery to the end of the life cycle. So here, making sure that we can track all user actions within the system. Then from the corporate security perspective, so what we've been really focused on is minimizing the time it takes for operators to export files and to share them with other parties. So here we're able to standardize a process where from intake, they're able to requester is able to log in, fill out the information that may be required, go through the correct approval channels, and then store the data based on the retention policies that are necessary for you. And then all of these historical logs would be maintained in one place after. So from a quick look at the workflow, an investigator or any requester really can make a request to an organization, and then that organization can send the invitation to the clearance account, where it's actually going to be the investigator who selects cameras that are of interest, confirms the recording times that are relevant for their investigation. There could be a request form that needs to be fulfilled before a request is taken. And that means for the camera owners, it's just a matter of reviewing that all of the information is accurate and making sure that there's justification for releasing the video, at which point the request can either be rejected or it could be approved, where the video can automatically be exported from the security center system or can be manually added from different VMS and sent into a case in clearance, where at that point an investigator would receive the email invitation with access to the information. So to better describe this, we'll walk through it in a demo. So here I'm logged into Clearance, and Clearance is a web application completely standalone from Security Center or other Genetec products. And we made it this way so it is agnostic. So it can be used with Security Center and coupled very tightly, but it could also be used by organizations who don't have Security Center at all, or if or if it's a mixed environment where there are certain sites with Genetec deployed and other sites that have a mix of surveillance assets or cameras. So here within the application, what we've added is basically a registry of the cameras. So this can be a list view of the information, and here we're only populating metadata about the devices. So there's not full live or recorded access to the information. We'll instead just provide a field of view of where the camera is pointed towards. That way an investigator has an idea of what the camera or where the camera was recording. We'll have location information that can be added. We'll also include how long the cameras are actually recording for. So if something happened 2 months ago, but there's only a 30-day retention policy for the archive or for the video recording server, well, we'll be able to filter out that camera when making a request. And how the request process would typically start is that someone internal to the organization could invite a third party to make a request. So here I'm going to add a hotmail.com account. I won't be very creative, I'll use my own name. And this is going to send an invitation to the person who's making a request. And I'm able to set an expiry time for how long they'll have to make the request. I'll just keep it as permanent for now. And this is going to send them an email invitation. If they're a new user, it'll include a username and a password, which they absolutely need to use to log into the system. I've just switched browsers here, so I did that a bit quickly. And inside this other browser, I'm logged in as the guest. So here I've already typed in my username, my password, and as a next step, if it's been configured, I'll need to accept the terms of use. And these terms of use have been defined by the account owner. So it's something that the legal team can review the copy and can be added to the account. So I need to accept this before being able to view any information or requesting files. So from the home page, as a guest, I have a summary of all of the cases that have been shared previously to me. I don't have the ability to search for other cases or files in the system. I'm only restricted to see what's been shared. And to initiate a request, I would go to the registry. And I can either filter it through, let me just refresh that. So here I could either filter it through the list, or I can filter it through the map view. So generally for the investigator, what becomes really helpful is actually being able to locate where camera positions are compared to the incident that they're reviewing. So here we have a lot of demo cameras set up around this area. And if the investigator knows that, for example, the incident happened around this vicinity, I can see their field of view information, the recording time, the field of view information, their recording time, and then make a request for the cameras that might be in proximity to the incident. So let's pretend that something happened on this corner next to the Hard Knocks gym. And then to start my request, I would just specify the amount of video that I want to review. And I'll keep this short for now, just so the upload goes quicker. And then on the next page of the wizard, the requester will be asked to include information about themselves and about where they're coming from. So here we've set up a form that would be typical for a law enforcement request. So let's say it's coming from Montreal PD. We ask them for the incident number related to the event that they're looking into, a description of what they're trying to find. So let's say it's a hit and run. Need to identify the suspect. We could also require or make it optional that the user uploads a file. So this could be any PDF document, or it could be even a photo. Generally, though, it would be used to attach a subpoena to the request if you require one. So here I can go in, just take a PDF document I have here. And what's interesting about these forms is that they're completely configurable by the account owner. It could be fields, it could be text boxes, it could be drop-down fields, it could be file attachments, and you have the flexibility of renaming field names and making them mandatory or not mandatory. If you're familiar with SurveyMonkey, it works a lot like that. So I'll go ahead and submit the request. So now this is going to trigger a new email to let the approvers or inside of the main account know that a new request has been sent. So I'll go into my requests page, and now here I'm able to see the details of all previous requests. I can filter them based on their status, so I could find only the ones that are pending, which is the new one I just made. I could also see the historical ones for those that have been completed or that were denied. And I'll go to the one we've just created together. And you'll see below I have the option to either approve or deny it. So if I approve, what's interesting is that these videos are coming from our Security Center integration. So from Security Center, the whole export and upload process becomes automatic. So here, a case is created immediately. And right now, the files are currently being exported and uploaded from the system. So for those who might be seeing clearance for the first time, while the export happens, I want to explain the case. The case is really the main entity inside of clearance, where you can include additional metadata about the incident itself. So here I could include an incident number, the classification, which are all customizable by you, of the incident, the start, the end time, the location of where the event took place, and we'll also include all of the files that need to be shared. And these could be any files. They don't only need to be coming from Security Center. I could create subfolders, and it could include documents or images or really spreadsheets, really anything that you'd want to attach to it. And access to the case and its associated files is going to be limited to the users who you've invited to this specific case. So right now, the only people with permissions to access it is the administrator group. And access is actually restricted based on their level of permissions. So certain users may be restricted to view only. Others can be given view and download rights. So generally, if I'm sending it to law enforcement, they'll have download. Edit would allow me to add more files and to change fields. And manage allows me to remove or invite new users. All right, so below, we see that one of the files I've requested has already been uploaded. And one of the big advantages here is that once it's added to clearance, we're automatically converting a G64 video, so the native file format in Genetec, into an MP4. And this allows the recipient to view it from their web browser without having to download and install the Genetec video player. So we also collect the metadata details of the file. So things like the timestamps, like you'd see below, the video or the camera locations are also maintained. And below, we even keep the metadata information from the security center system. So the camera information, the MAC address, and the system details. So this is all in an effort to maintain the chain of evidence. So from the time the video gets exported, we have the original source of where the file stemmed from. And I'll download the file just for my example. We'll also track all user activity going forward. So if a user goes in and tries to download the file or watches a file or shares a case, every action inside the system will be tracked. And this includes their username, the timestamp, and the IP address from where the request occurred. So I'll go back to my case. And here, see if the other video has been uploaded yet. Yeah. All right, so both files are currently on the case, and you'll see that now that both files have been added, the case itself was shared with our guest user. So they've been automatically added. And this guest user, the original requester, has view and download permissions only. So that's a rule that we're able to define in the account to state what their default level of access would be. If I preferred that they had view only, I'd be able to set that up as well. And we're able to set up another expiry for how long they actually have access to the cases and the files themselves. So if I want to give them only a week, now they'll only have until next Friday to be able to log in and go and review and download the files if they need a copy. For any other files that you'd want to include, you could just drag and drop them inside of the browser. So if I had another photo, for example, that I want to add, I'll just show a quick example of it. I could take one from my desktop and drag it here so it's uploaded. And so any third-party system information, whether it's captures from a cell phone, from body cameras, from third-party video management systems, those can all be appended to the same case as well. So beyond adding the original information, we also have tools for video redaction. So if ever there was a request from the public where you needed to share a file, or maybe there's an incident and you want to create a training video for it, we also have the ability to redact video. So for any video that's supported inside the system, it's going to allow you to detect faces from the scene. And so this is an analytic that runs, and it really relies on having front-facing individuals. So being able to detect eyes, nose, a mouth will help for a successful process. So here you see I've just selected 2 individuals, and I'm able to toggle these masks on or off depending on if I want to keep it. So let's say for this example, I want to be able to release a video to actually identify who the individual in the red shirt is. So In this scenario, there's also the cashier, and her back is turned against the camera. So instead of the automatic process, we have manual masks that can be created. And here I can create the bounding box. And what's interesting is I can just click and hold down on the circle area on the target. And as I hold down with my mouse, it's going to replay the video in slow motion. So this allows me to create the redaction layer. And right now it's very simple. The cashier isn't really moving, so I could just leave the box there. But we have a fourth individual coming in. And in this scenario, the image quality is too blurry, so the analytic is going to fail. This also happens in cases where a person is too far in the background of a scene. So here, we'll also have to create a manual mask. And this is where there's a lot of value in the approach, where I could just click and follow the person as they walk out of the video. So the nice thing is, for anyone who's done video editing before, is as opposed to having to go frame by frame and add a new mask layer each time the individual moves, now I could just drag and drop where I need to apply the mask. So once I'm happy with everything, I can select the type of mask I want to apply, whether it's a blur or a black box, and then I'll create the video. There's a bit of processing time for that. I won't do it live, but this is all in the background, so I could close the browser, turn off my PC if I want, and come back to it later to get the final results. So this is an example of a video I've converted previously. And this doesn't override the original file, it just creates a second copy. So that's a very, very quick overview of the functionality and parts of the software. So one of the things that we looked at was the automatic process from Security Center. So this relies on a plugin that gets installed on the Security Center side. The plugin is responsible for publishing the cameras from Security Center into clearance. What's nice here is that it will take the locations of any cameras that you've mapped out in Plan Manager and automatically populate those inside of clearance. You'll also receive notifications in Security Desk when new requests come in. So here an operator would be able to receive new notifications from the tray table, and then they can go directly into clearance through the link associated. And then most importantly is that once approved, the video automatically is exported from Security Center, so without the need for someone to go in, find the video, and export it themselves. So a couple of design considerations here. Today, the automation for the export is currently built with Security Center and GE Lighting. So we're working on additional integrations where we'll be able to automate that process as well. And for other devices, so anything outside of Security Center and GE Lighting at the moment, we can also upload the camera list into clearance. So there it's done via spreadsheet. So there all we need is the name, description of the cameras, thumbnail, retention time details, as well as the thumbnail that you would like to include for the field of view. And then we'll manually upload that into the account. The other consideration there is that whenever there's an incident that needs to be reviewed, you don't get the automation for the export. The file would need to be manually exported and then uploaded to the account. So just as a quick summary on clearance then, and hopefully this came across over the demo, I really want to stress on the fact that the application itself can be used to manage all types of digital information. So whether it's video or non-video, and that might be produced from different surveillance systems, whether Genetec or not, body cameras, cell phone recordings, incident reports that you may have. Those are centralized inside of a case, and on the case, you're able to manage the rules for how long the video is stored or how long the files are stored, and who has access and the level of access individuals have. You're able to easily go in and search for past information. And here, even once the account is built up with several thousands or hundreds of thousands of cases and terabytes of information, the quick will always be very, very speedy. So it works just like Google, where if you have any keywords like an incident number or a suspect name to search on, it's an immediate search result that comes up afterwards. But most importantly, what we're really focused on is making sure we can find ways to make collaboration easier. So whether it's for internal requests or requests that need to be shared with law enforcement or attorneys, we're able to have workflows set up to facilitate this process. We also have those editing tools for video redaction available in the event that may be required. So one of the things I also want to mention is that the functionality, the ability to review the video directly, this isn't only limited to G64 files or files from Security Center. We also support about just over 100 different video codecs. So even if it's coming from different DVR systems or different VMS manufacturers, we have a similar type of technology where we convert the original file to an MP4 so it can be viewed directly from the web browser. We'll always maintain the original, I should add, but this really helps to avoid the recipient from having to install standalone video players, which is getting more and more tricky as IT departments set controls on people's workstations where they don't have admin rights, so they can't install any new applications themselves without getting IT involved. There's also a mobile app for clearance. So here, if you have any security guards or staff who could benefit from it, it's basically a push type of application, or a capture type of application where you can take video recordings, audio recordings, or witness statements, and photographs, and then send that directly into clearance. And what's nice about it is, while on the phone, those files get encrypted, but as soon as it's uploaded to clearance, the information will be wiped from the phone. So that avoids the risk of the phone itself to be subpoenaed. And one of the really important things, especially looking at some of the projects we've been working on in the recent months, is that Genetec Clearance is built API first. And so what this means is that we're first, for any functionality that you see in our application inside the UI, we first develop APIs that our developers are then using to code the functionality themselves. These APIs are all public. So if ever there are integrations you or your development teams would like to work on, we provide documented access to them. I'll just pull that up. And these are all REST-based APIs with sample code available where someone could go in and write an integration to create new cases, or write an integration to upload files automatically to the system. So in recent times, there's been integrations to incident management systems, to risk systems, where they're tying that information into the case in clearance. So that way, it allows them to centralize some of their incident information together with their digital evidence. So in summary, really what we're looking to provide is an efficient and responsible way for managing digital evidence. So one, being able to store and centralize evidence across disparate sources, being able to encrypt and redact video to make sure that individuals' privacy stays protected, that you're able to collaborate more easily within your organization and with people outside of it, like law enforcement and attorneys, and then just make sure that the data itself stays auditable. So you're able to have one app where you're able to fall back on, go and look back on historical events without having to go through evidence locker and find past DVDs or a shared repository, which can sometimes get out of control. So with that, I really want to thank everyone for joining today's presentation. And like we mentioned at the start, so for the next 15 minutes, we'll have a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please just send them through the GoToMeeting chat, and I'll start reading them through